What's up, everybody? This is Tim from Arm Wrestling Secrets, and today I wanted to talk about table psychology. Okay, now remember that your body is a machine, and it's going to do what your mind tells it to do. And so after a lot of years of arm wrestling, which is, of course, a strength sport, a very physical strength sport, obviously, you've got to remember your mind is the most important part, okay? So I always think of arm wrestling more like a chess match, okay? But I'm going to put it let you look at it in a few different ways from my perspective and how I look at it psychologically and how I approach the match psychologically, okay? Now, just to kind of clarify what I mean by that all that means is, what am I thinking about? What is my mentality going into matches? Where is my mind at? Okay, and compared to my opponents, I imagine it's in a very different place. Now, I made a video just the other day called "Why I Don't Pump Myself Up Before Matches," which basically just kind of went into kind of initial psychology for arm wrestling and how I approach the table, and how I basically, just to summarize what I went over in that video, make sure to watch that one if you want to. Is what I went over kind of initially in that video was discussing the fact that when I'm approaching the table, I'm specifically not pumping myself up. I'm preparing my mind for what I'm going to do with this particular opponent. I'm considering everything that I'm going to do with this particular opponent. I'm considering what movement I think this opponent's going to do based on what I've seen them do and how they're approaching the table. The way you're approaching the table, your approach to the match is every bit as important and dictates what happens during the match. Okay, I want to make that clear. So think of it this way. Your name gets called for an arm wrestling match, okay? And oftentimes, as I mentioned in the previous video, oftentimes your opponent runs up there and he's clapping his hands and he's like getting kind of juiced up for the match, okay? And as I mentioned, his mind, more than likely, whether he wins or loses the match, his mind at the time of getting called up more than likely is just get myself ready, get the adrenaline flowing. They have a general idea of what they might do, maybe, okay? And I mentioned how my approach was very much the opposite. And after having done that earlier in my career, I'd get myself pumped up too, okay? But as I mentioned, not to go over the initial video I already did, I'm going to talk about brand new stuff here, but I talked about how my psychology would be to, the second I find out who my opponent is, I'm going to consider what I'm going to do with them. I don't have the same approach with every opponent. It's different for every single opponent, and I'm going to consider very, very seriously what I really think this person's going to do. And I can make last-minute adjustments at the table, too. If I think they're setting up for a different move than they were, I'm going to adjust, okay? But going back to the psychology and what I wanted to get into, now here's the thing. I'm already going to give you what I think is a little bit of an edge, because I know most 95% at least of arm wrestlers, they're not thinking about anything that I'm saying right now unless they've seen this video, and they probably haven't. Okay, so now, as I said, when I'm going up to the table, I'm considering kind of what I'm going to do and things like that, but let's move on from there, okay? And talk about some of the general things that I'm going to do. And I just want to kind of be a free-flowing talk on the subject without getting into anything really, really specific. It's like how to ice an aggressive opponent. You know, an opponent comes up. So I already kind of leading on from the last video. This would lead on from the last video. An opponent comes up and they're all pumped up, okay? And I said, I don't do that because I'm really just considering what I'm going to do with this opponent and how I'm going to beat them. So if they're going to be going for a low hook, I'm going to be going for a low hand top roll, and I'm going to be considering, excuse me, exactly how to set myself up for that. But now let's move on to further psychology. Okay, now this, I think you're going to find this very interesting, okay? And if you also saw my video on how I deal with the refs, okay, that may have seemed, by the title, it seemed like a pretty boring video. I probably should have put a different title on that, but I think you should watch that, okay? I have a very specific psychological approach with the refs too, okay? And remember, this is all very much on purpose. This isn't happening by accident. Everything I'm going to tell you, I'm doing on purpose in order to get the desired result, which is hopefully the tournament win. But what I'm focused on is winning the match. Psychologically, when you get called up, just focus on this opponent. Don't focus on the tournament or anything else. Now, that's not what I was going to say psychologically, but that's kind of what I wanted to obviously touch on, is just thinking about what's ahead of you, okay? But so icing an aggressive opponent, for instance, they come up and they're all pumped up, leading on from the last video. Okay, so I talked about how I don't do that, how I'm very calm and I'm thinking about what I'm going to do. Now, at the same time, I want my opponent to be trying to pump himself up and get aggressive, okay? But at the same time, I don't really want them to be brutally strong, and I don't want them to use brute force on me. I'd rather minimize that, and I think you understand that. At the same time, I don't want an already strong person to be more angry or more aggressive, let's say, and really try to put more effort into it by making them angry or making them more aggressive. Okay, so how to ice an aggressive opponent? Okay, this is leading right into psychology of arm wrestling and exactly what I wanted to talk to you guys about and what I think what you'd find interesting. Okay, as I'm coming up to the table and I'm meeting this aggressive opponent or a non-aggressive opponent, it doesn't matter what they're like. Remember, my approach to opponents is pretty much the same. It's going to vary a little bit depending on what their mentality and their attitude is, okay? And I'll try to touch on some of those subjects here. But let's say you have an aggressive opponent and they're up there and they're pumping themselves up. And this will make sense, especially if you watched my last video, okay? Because this is leading right on into further psychology of arm wrestling. Is I'm not just going up there going, well, I'm going to arm wrestle this guy now. No. We are approaching a machine gun nest from a very particular position. We want to destroy it without taking any casualties. That's a big difference than just running up the hill at the machine gun and going, well, I hope it works out. Think about that. In arm wrestling, most people just run at the machine gun. They just frontal attack, just hope it works out when I get there. They're not making battle plans. They're not like, well, if I had a 12-man squad and I had to attack a machine gun on top of a hill, let's say there were 12 enemy soldiers up there, okay, equal numbers. My job as the squad leader is to destroy the machine gun, kill the machine gun crew without ideally losing any of my own soldiers. And I would do that by being creative and smart and by thinking about how I'm going to do that. And then approaching the machine gun nest in a very particular, organized, planned manner and probably attacking the weakest point. And I think you'd all agree with that. Now look at your opponent the same way. Enemy machine gun nest, okay? Think about your approach. Okay, so here we go. The psychology of arm wrestling. Now let's get into it. Okay, without any more fluff, okay, let's get into it. My opponent's standing there. You're going to shake hands with your opponent. That's the correct thing to do, and I love that. I love it. It has respect. Okay, there's respect there, and I like that about the sport, but that's not what I like about it. I'm going to shake hands with this opponent. Okay, now they want to beat me. Their friends are there. Their family is there. And nowadays, more than likely, it's also on videotape. So it's going to get captured forever. So the intensity is pretty high. Everybody, when they go up to the arm wrestle table, they want to win. Okay, and so they're going to do their utmost to do that. And that's what you already know. Okay, but I'm going to try to take steam out of an aggressive opponent or a non-aggressive opponent, even an opponent that seems to be in a meditative state. They're going to, believe me, they're suddenly going to turn into a beast the second it says go, if they're a real arm wrestler, okay? And you're at a real arm wrestling tournament, you're going to see all kinds of different approaches. You're going to see guys that are yelling and screaming and pumping themselves up and talking trash to maybe you or to the opponent, and you're going to see other people that come up and they're totally in like a Zen state. And they might even say a prayer or something, and then they go up and they don't say anything. They shake hands and they're very gentlemanly about it, okay? And so you're going to see all different spectrum of approaches, okay? But I always approach my opponents basically the same way. The more pumped up they are, the more I'm going to try to pump them down, okay? But here we go, okay? So I'm going to remember this thing, and I want you to remember the psychology of arm wrestling. Just remember what I said about a machine gun nest, okay? I always look at arm wrestling other ways, okay? You always have to look at it in other ways, and it helps to make more sense of it, okay? So Think about it this way, and this is, believe me, I'm not forgetting what I'm talking about. I'm going up to the table to meet my opponent, and I want you to think about it this way, and I'll come right back. Okay, now, if you really dislike somebody and they're talking trash to you, don't you want to hurt them worse? Like, let's say it was a fight, and somebody was talking trash to you and they're pushing you around and they're saying things about your mother, okay? They're just going to bring the worst out of you. They're going to make you the most mad, okay? So if your opponent's aggressive at the table, I want their mind to be on brute force mode, so I want them to be aggressive, but I don't want to pump them up more, and I actually don't want to make them more aggressive towards me, actually. So you know how you stick out your hand when somebody wants to shake your hand? I just mean in regular life. And they just kind of automatically do it, like they seem like a jerk if they don't, okay? Now, in arm wrestling, you normally shake hands, even if the opponent's like pumped up and they really want to beat you, okay? You're going to shake their hand, but this is my opportunity to lighten their mood a little bit. And here we go with the psychology, is I'm going to shake their hand, I'm going to wish them good luck. How you doing, man? Good luck. I'm going to smile. Okay. Now, remember what I just said about somebody that you're angry at. Okay. Now, if somebody just came up to you and you're already like, I'm going to beat this guy, and he comes up to you and he's like, how you doing, man? Good luck. It kind of takes a little steam out of you. Okay. And that's the reason I'm doing it. It's very automatic, and I'm doing that on purpose. And I'm going to turn around and maybe get my chalk and take my time. Okay. And then I'm going to be a frustrating opponent. Okay, now regardless of if you're pumped up, if you're not pumped up, okay, I'm going to come to the table, I'm going to shake your hand, I'm going to wish you good luck, okay? Then, now, moving on with the psychology, and you guys can apply your table psychology however you want. I'm going to tell you how I do it, okay? And some of you might think this is dirty, some of you might think this is weak, some of you might think this is stupid, some of you might just totally disagree, and you can go ahead. Do it your way. This is what I'm saying I do, and I'm saying there's a huge mental approach to arm wrestling that I've learned over the years, and this is what works for me, and this is why it works for me. Okay, so I'm going to lighten my opponent's mood a little bit. I'm going to wish him good luck, which is almost like saying, I hope you win the match. This is a very odd thing to say, but it's very specific, and that's exactly what I say to the opponent. Okay, after that, what I'm going to do is, like I said, I'm going to take my time a little bit. I might be a little bit slow. I might take a minute to get set up, and I'm just thinking about what I'm going to do, and I'm trying to stress this opponent a little bit. Okay, now, if somebody's pumped up at the table, they're going to be already under a little bit of stress, okay, but they're going to want to get it over with. They're going to want to get the match over with. They want to get it started. They got the juices flowing. Okay, now I'm not going to allow them that luxury. Sorry, I had some bikes going behind me there. I don't want to allow them the luxury of being pumped up. I'm going to stress them out. Okay, so if they're pumped up and they're like, I'm going to need to regrip. My finger's jammed, or I need to get the bone chip out of my elbow, which is a real thing. I need to get the bone chip out of my elbow, but I'm going to shake out of that grip. I'm going to regrip. I'm going to also, another thing I might do, if they're really rotating or grabbing my hand and they're taking a really thick grip, and like I said, I wasn't going on anything specific. I'm just going to let this flow, and you guys can pick out of it, hopefully, some gold nuggets, okay? If they're putting a lot of stress on my hand and they're really pulling me around the table, I'm just going to go totally weak. I'm going to let them, they have to be cheating at that point, because if they're turning my wrist in any way, I'm just going to let them turn it. If they're going to pull my hand, if they're going to pull me towards them using back pressure, I'm just going to let my arm flop across the table. If they're going to use any loading side pressure against me, I'm going to let my arm fall to the side. That's very frustrating, but I can just say, hey, ref, this guy's cheating. There's not supposed to be any movement before the start of the match. That's frustrating to an aggressive opponent already. And some of you guys are already like, oh, I don't like this guy. You don't like me because that's the opponent that's a dangerous opponent. Okay, I'm thinking about beating you every second. I'm standing there, and I'm going to keep regripping until I find the right one that I think is going to be most conducive to me beating you with the technique that I've chosen to beat you with, okay? But the opponent's standing there, they're all pumped up and they're squeezing. I'm not going to give them what they want, okay? If they're pumped up, I'm going to try to pump them down, okay? And like I said, moving on with the psychology of that, okay? We already talked about a little bit of gripping stuff. I'm just going to let them pull me around and say, hey, ref, this isn't right. We need to, he's pulling me all over the place. And the guy has to stop doing that. He'll have to stop pulling you all over. He'll have to, suddenly his approach has changed a little bit. Maybe he was planning on loading a certain direction. By pulling in a certain direction, he already told me where he was going. If he's pulling me, meaning if he's pulling backwards and he's pulling me towards him and he's loading back pressure, he's pulling with back pressure. He's going with a back pressure loaded move. I know he's going to be pulling me in the direction across the table. Okay, that already leads me to a counter type movement. He's giving me information, but I don't have to let him have his way and actually be able to load. I already stole his battle plan. If he was going sideways, he's probably going to be doing some kind of side pressure, okay? If he's turning his wrist a little bit, he's testing maybe his angle for his hook. Okay, but all of these are little things that you can be looking at and paying a specific attention to, especially after watching this video, okay? If he's testing your fingers with his pressure, maybe he's going to do posting top roll. Okay, all of these things are going to give you information as to how to counter and win that particular match. Okay, so moving on with psychology, okay? I'm going to talk to my opponent. Now, I don't trash talk my opponent. I was already clear about the fact that I don't want to make them more aggressive. You're going to see opponents do that, and that's fine. That's if it works for them, I'm do it. I don't. Most arm wrestlers are fairly nice people in real life. They're not like mean people, even though it might seem that way when they're at the table. They can seem really aggressive and very tough, and they are very tough people generally, but that doesn't mean they're not nice people and family people, and they have kids and everything else, and I do too. Okay, and I'm a nice guy, but that doesn't mean I don't want to win at the table, and I'm going to do what I have to do to win at the table. And I realize there's a lot more to it than just physical mechanics. Okay, and I want to be clear just before I go on with more psychology, is that the psychology of arm wrestling doesn't replace the physical mechanics. Okay, so you can't go up there and just go, well, I have better arm wrestling psychology. I don't need to really know what I'm doing. That's not true. You need to know all the different technical skills, and you need to have all the strengths there so that you can actually apply the techniques on the table for real. Okay, so this is all stuff you do after you've built the biomechanics and strength and tactics and table techniques. Okay, so you have to know what you're doing, obviously, but this is what you can do to kind of even the odds. Okay, so not or turn the odds in your favor. Okay, we're giving you more of an edge. Okay, so another thing I'm going to do, like I said, I don't trash talk my opponents, but I'm going to talk to them if I get a chance, because like I said, I'm going to frustrate and delay the match. I don't want it to start. I'm not going to get myself a foul from the refs, but I don't want it to start right away. I want to take my time. I want to get the position that I want. I only have one chance at this, and that's why arm wrestling competitions and matches go so fast, is once they start, they can be over pretty quick. So the setup and how you approach it is actually way more important. Okay, so if I'm talking to my opponent, like I said, I'm not going to try to make them more angry. I'm going to just ask them simple questions, because I want to, like I said in my first video, I want to get their mind off of what they're going to do technically with me. I'm thinking about that while I'm talking to them. I've already been considering that during the whole time I've been up there. Okay? And so I've already made those considerations. Okay, but what I'm going to be doing here is if I'm asking them something, that's specifically to get their mind off of any technical matters at the table. So what I'm going to ask them is a question that's non-aggressive, and it's something that they would probably have no trouble asking, and it's not going to make them angry. It's not going to start any kind of trouble at the table. It would be more confusing, and that's what I want. I want them thinking about something other than exactly what they're going to do in the next couple of seconds when the match starts. I just want them thinking about anything else, but I don't want them angry. Okay, so maybe you'll find this interesting. Okay, so I'm going to say, where are you from? Everybody knows the answer to that. Most people answer it, even if it's right before the match. If they don't answer it, I shake out of the grip. I just kind of have a problem and I shake out and I come back and then I'll tell them where I'm from on the next grip, for instance. Okay, and they might still say nothing, okay, or they might answer you, okay, but their mind is either thinking about what you're saying. So I'm doing my snake charmer move here. Their mind is either thinking about what you're saying, annoyed by what you're saying, confused by what you're saying. More than likely, they're going to answer your questions, which is what you really want, okay? And like I said, do what you want to do. This is what works for me, okay? One way or the other, I want them thinking about other things. So that's kind of part of the psychology that I go up to in the match. As I mentioned, I don't get into any type of big trash talking matches. If my opponent goes completely silent on me, okay, that's probably the right thing to do. The right thing to do against somebody like me who's talking to you and everything else. And I'm going to be very nice. I'm going to be pleasant. I'm not going to be rude. And then in terms of confusion, here's just going further, okay? Because it goes on and on. Think about misdirection, like misinformation in a battle. That's like the enemy's listening to you over the communication lines, over your communication line, okay, and you're sending a coded message, okay, and you send out a coded message that gets broken on purpose, or you send out a message with information where you know the enemy's listening and you send out false battle plans. Okay, and that happens all the time in a real war. That's a great way to mislead and misinform the enemy. So they think you're attacking one place and then you actually attack someplace else. And the arm wrestling, you can apply that same type of battle strategy to arm wrestling. Okay, so one thing I'll also do is misdirection at the table. Since I'm talking about talking to my opponent, I'm not just going to ask them where they're from. I'm also going to do a little bit of misdirection. Okay, now while they're actually maybe trying to move my wrist around or move me, I might do the same thing to them. I might even say something. I might be like, see how my hook works on you. And of course, I have no intention of hooking, or maybe I do. Okay, now it's just to build up the misleading. Or I might say, let's say hook or top roll, and just look at the person, or press, and put a little pressure on there, and then just kind of laugh, and get some chalk and come back and I think nothing of it, but the person will already be like, if they were thinking about a specific move, they might already be questioning what they're going to do, which is exactly what I want. I want them in a state of confusion. I want them in a state of just not knowing exactly where I'm coming from and what I'm doing. And I want to be confident before the match starts that they're kind of in that state as much as I could possibly can. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm doing. And remember, all the time, the whole time, I'm doing all of this theater, which is really what it is. It's the sport, okay? It's preparation for winning the match. All of that is laying groundwork and foundation for getting up there and actually, when we say go, that's like when you go attack and you're attacking that machine gun. There's no time for mistakes then. There's no time for planning then. There's no time for organization then. The game is on and it's going to be over fairly quickly, okay, whether it works out for you or not, okay, but that's why you want to be organized and planned before the ref says go. I hope that was constructive for you guys. I will see you in the next one.